What if the billions we've spent trying to fix a crisis have only made its shadows darker? That's the quiet ache at the heart of California's homelessness battle, a story of good intentions tangled in red tape, where every new dollar seemed to bring more questions than answers. If you're here because you care about the nuts and bolts of American politics, about how our tax dollars are spent, and whether leaders like Governor Newsom are truly delivering on their promises, then you're in the right place.
Deep gratitude to the voters of California that entrusted us with the biggest investments of any state in American history. This is the most exciting work that's happening in the United States of America.
Today, we're breaking it all down. The numbers, the programs, and the human cost behind the headlines. And if this conversation strikes a chord, do me a favor, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments about what you change, and subscribe for more straight talk on the issues that keep us up at night. All right, let's dive in. Between 2018 and 2023, California poured $24 billion into fighting homelessness, a massive investment for a crisis that keeps growing. When you break that down across the roughly 200,000 people who experienced homelessness during that time, it comes out to about $120,000 per person over 5 years. Now, that doesn't mean folks on the street were handed a check. Instead, it represents the per capita spending meant to address the problem. The Hoover Institution, using 2019's baseline of 151,000 homeless Californians, put the figure even higher, around $159,000 per person. That's nearly enough to buy a modest home in many parts of the country, and yet, despite this enormous investment, homelessness didn't shrink. It grew, rising 20% from 151,000 inches 2019 to more than 181,000 by 2023. California's crisis is most visible in Los Angeles and San Francisco, but it's part of a broader national struggle. The state is home to about a third of America's entire homeless population, showing just how deeply rooted the issue really island. And here's the uncomfortable question. If $120,000 per person is enough to buy a modest home over 5 years, why hasn't it pulled people out of homelessness? The answer is complicated. Housing is only part of the puzzle, and deeper issues like addiction, mental health, and poverty often stand in the way of stability.
They told us that they were going to put us in a motel room for 7 days, and that within that 7 days that they'll be back to take us to move straight into apartments and give us housing that was like from a program Step Up or something like that. Right. But what they ended up doing was they put us in a motel for 7 days, and they never came back. And then once the 7 days were up, we were kicked back into the streets.
California's homelessness spending has shifted over time, from $2.3 billion in 2018 to 19 to $3.8 billion in 2020 to 21, boosted by pandemic relief. But by 2024 to 25, a $45 billion budget deficit forced funding cuts down to $2.5 billion. Meanwhile, emergency services for chronically homeless individuals already cost around $50,000 per person per year, once you factor in hospital stays, jail time, and police response. This $120,000 figure has since become a lightning rod in debates about what critics call the homeless industrial complex, a web of nonprofits, consultants, and bureaucracies accused of sustaining themselves on endless funding rather than solving the crisis. Without strong oversight and clear outcomes, money's been spread across countless programs with little to show for it. By 2024, California's homeless population passed 187,000, even as spending soared. The lesson here is simple. It's not just about how much we spend, but how effectively we spend it. Until funds are tracked, measured, and tied directly to sustainable outcomes, California risks repeating the same cycle, piling billions into programs without delivering lasting relief to the people who need it most. Real accountability, not just bigger budgets, is the only way forward. California has poured an astounding $24 billion into the fight against homelessness between 2018 and 2023, with the promise of building permanent housing and offering support services to those in need. At the center of this massive effort stands the Housing First model, a strategy built on the idea that giving someone a safe and stable place to live must come before tackling deeper issues like addiction or mental illness. On paper, it makes perfect sense. But in practice, despite these historic investments, the results have been mixed at best. Homelessness continues to rise, leaving many to wonder, with so much money spent, why hasn't the crisis eased? Where is all this funding truly going? And what's happening behind the numbers?
And I can honestly say that I believe that the people that are responsible for the homeless funding have been misappropriating the funding for years, and nobody's ever blown the whistle because nobody really cares to stand up for this city.
One of the state's cornerstone efforts, Project Home Key, set out to convert existing hotels and motels into affordable housing. With $3.6 billion committed and an average cost of $144,000 per unit, it was far cheaper than building from scratch. Thousands of units were created, but a key problem remains. There's little long-term data to prove whether these homes are helping people rebuild their lives. In Los Angeles, for instance, where homelessness is climbing year after year, critics argue that the program is only scratching the surface. Are we addressing the root causes, like addiction and untreated mental illness, or are we offering temporary solutions that don't last? Another major initiative, the Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention Program, known as HAP, set aside roughly $3 billion for shelters, eviction prevention, and outreach. On the surface, this sounds promising. The program has helped some families avoid losing their homes, which is no small feat. But large portions of the funding remain unspent, and the chronically homeless, especially those battling severe mental illness or addiction, are often left behind. Can simply preventing evictions truly solve such a deep and complex crisis? Or does this approach ignore the hardest to reach populations who need the most help? The Encampment Resolution Fund, with its $1 billion in ongoing funding, takes a different route, clearing encampments and placing people in temporary shelter. Thousands of camps have been dismantled, but the criticism is sharp. Are we really solving anything, or just moving people from one corner to another? Without long-term housing and treatment, disbanding camps often feels like rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship. Worse, with no reliable tracking of outcomes, we don't even know if these funds are producing measurable progress. The numbers back up these concerns. A 2024 state audit revealed troubling gaps in accountability, showing that while some programs, like HAP, help prevent families from slipping into homelessness, the total number of unhoused Californians is still rising. Which begs the question, Are we throwing billions of dollars at a problem without truly understanding it? One factor that cannot be ignored is the fentanyl epidemic. Overdose deaths among California's homeless population have skyrocketed, with fentanyl linked to more than 70% of fatalities. This crisis highlights a brutal truth. Housing alone cannot solve homelessness if addiction and untreated mental health issues are left unaddressed. Giving someone a roof is a start, but if we don't pair housing with treatment, counseling, and long-term recovery options, we're not breaking the cycle. California's efforts, though ambitious and well-intentioned, show us a sobering reality. Big spending alone doesn't guarantee success. To truly turn the tide, funding must be better targeted, outcomes must be tracked with transparency, and programs must blend housing with health care and addiction treatment. The ultimate question we must face is this: how do we build a system that doesn't just move people off the streets, but truly helps them rebuild their lives? California has poured billions into tackling homelessness, yet the results remain murky at best. The state's massive spending has been dogged by waste, fraud, and a glaring lack of accountability, leaving taxpayers to wonder, where did all the money really go? What began as a rush of well-intentioned programs soon revealed cracks. A 2024 audit uncovered a disturbing truth. Without consistent oversight, inefficiencies spread like wildfire. Governor Gavin Newsom did launch the Housing Accountability Unit in 2024 to rein in problems, but it came too late to stop years of mismanagement. Since 2021, the California Interagency Council on Homelessness has stopped tracking outcomes altogether, leaving billions essentially unaccounted for. That void created the perfect breeding ground for waste and fraud. In San Francisco, Providence House was ordered to repay $1 million for fraudulent invoices. In Los Angeles, a federal probe uncovered $2.3 billion in mishandled funds. Even worse, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LAHSA, burned through 40% of a $1.2 billion allocation on soft costs like consultants, producing only 117 housing units, a pitiful outcome compared to the promises made. Nonprofits, once seen as trusted partners, have also been caught in scandal. HomeRise, for instance, handed out over $200,000 in executive bonuses while slashing services to the very people it was meant to serve. LAHSA's own CEO eventually resigned amid accusations of reckless spending, and a federal judge had to step in to demand an audit to trace the missing money. These events have left many Californians skeptical, not just of state officials, but of the nonprofits entrusted with carrying out the mission. Meanwhile, the fentanyl epidemic has only deepened the crisis. In Orange County, overdose deaths among the homeless jumped 50% from 2020 to 2023, with fentanyl tied to 70% of those fatalities. Too often, money earmarked for housing and recovery never reaches the people who need it. Instead, it gets swallowed by inefficiency, fraud, or bureaucracy, while men and women on the streets continue to die. The link between wasted dollars and rising deaths is impossible to ignore. The math is staggering. If $120,000 was supposedly spent per person, why is homelessness worse today than before? the reality is grim. For every dollar intended to help the homeless, 4 seem to disappear into the machine. The frustration is palpable. Families, veterans, and seniors still sleep in tents, while consultants and administrators cash checks. This isn't just a financial failure, it's a moral one. Without accountability, the system rewards those who profit from the crisis while punishing those who live it. California's homelessness response needs more than money. It needs transparency, oversight, and proof that every dollar spent brings real change. Until then, taxpayers are left footing the bill for consultants, bureaucrats, and wasted programs, while tents still line the sidewalks of Los Angeles, San Francisco, and beyond. The lesson is clear. No matter how noble the intent, unchecked spending without accountability will always collapse into cycles of failure. It's time to demand that resources go where they belong, to housing, treatment, and hope. Only then can California and the nation truly begin to solve this crisis. Four, broader implications and why it persists. The figure of $120,000 per homeless individual in California is more than just a budget entry. It's a painful symbol of a crisis that continues to fester despite billions poured into the fight. And this isn't just California's burden, it reflects a national wound. In 2024, homelessness across the U.S. surged to nearly 770,000 people, an alarming 18% increase from the year before. California shoulders the heaviest share, with more than 187,000 unhoused by early 2025, about 1 in every 4 of the nation's total. Still, there are glimmers of progress. Preliminary data shows a slower 3% statewide rise, while Los Angeles County reported a 9.5% drop in unsheltered homelessness, and San Diego posted a 13.5% decline.
Ms. Harris.
These shifts prove that targeted, well-executed strategies can bend the curve. But the roots of the crisis run deep. Housing costs remain crushing, with median home prices hitting $884,000 in 2025 and rents consuming half of many families' incomes. 1 in 3 households teeters on the edge of poverty, and every year another 10,000 Californians fall into homelessness. Zoning restrictions and neighborhood resistance choke off affordable construction, trapping thousands in a cycle where the promise of stability slips further away. Meanwhile, gaps in mental health care and the relentless grip of addiction, especially fentanyl, intensify the despair. In Los Angeles County alone, fentanyl was linked to 70% of overdose deaths among the homeless in 2023. On a brighter note, nationwide overdoses fell 27% in 2024, largely due to wider access to naloxone. Yet, fentanyl, often mixed with methamphetamine in 71% of fatal cases, continues to turn well-meaning aid into ashes. It forces us to ask, can $120,000 per person truly rebuild lives? Or does it simply disappear into the void of untreated addiction? And California is hardly alone. New York struggles under the strain of incoming migrants, while Seattle battles sprawling encampments. Federal grant cuts of 13% threaten to tighten resources even further. Yet, there are encouraging examples. Napa County has managed steady declines in its homeless population, and Sonoma County reported a dramatic 23% drop to just under 2,000 unhoused residents. These successes prove that precision and accountability matter. Still, the system is plagued by misaligned incentives. Too many nonprofits chase funding rather than outcomes, while politicians point to big spending totals instead of measurable results. Breaking this cycle requires more than throwing money at the problem. California must expand affordable housing, embed mental health and addiction treatment into every shelter, and enforce transparent metrics to track progress. Only by making these deliberate shifts can the state and the nation transform that phantom figure of $120,000 from a symbol of failure into a foundation for lasting change. California now finds itself at a turning point in the fight against homelessness. Recent audits have laid bare a system riddled with inefficiencies, underscoring the urgent need for reform. The 2024 state audit called for annual public reports on both spending and outcomes, a push to bring long overdue transparency and accountability. But as 2025 begins, it's clear that surface level fixes won't be enough. The state must embrace bold, comprehensive reforms, including modern tools like blockchain to track every dollar and prevent waste or phantom invoices from slipping through the cracks. Key priorities should include embedding mental health services into every shelter, ensuring naloxone is widely available to reverse fentanyl overdoses, and tackling zoning laws that block affordable housing. Experts argue that the most effective path is integration, bringing housing, treatment, and research together under one roof. Programs like Urban Alchemy, which trains and employs formerly incarcerated individuals as community navigators, show how trauma-informed grassroots approaches can build trust and deliver real results. The fentanyl crisis adds another layer of urgency. While California's National Guard has seized significant amounts of the drug, efforts must go further upstream with tighter border controls and more targeted outreach to those most at risk. Meanwhile, the investigation into the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, LAHSA, highlights the necessity of rigorous oversight and regular audits of nonprofits. Executive salaries must reflect public service values, not corporate bonuses, and funding must be tied to measurable impact. On the political front, California's leaders need to step beyond rhetoric. Governor Newsom's Housing Accountability Unit must back words with enforcement, clawing back funds in cases of fraud and safeguarding resources for programs like HHAP, which has helped thousands despite facing cuts. At the national level, reform means expanding emergency solutions grants and reviving the Interagency Council to strengthen coordination between federal and state agencies. True reform, however, cannot rest on government alone. It requires collective action from faith-based groups, local businesses, and community organizations working side by side. With transparency, prevention, and data-driven strategies at the core, California can begin to build a system that is not only sustainable, but transformative. The path to reform may be slow and difficult, but it must also be deliberate. Every dollar spent must lead to tangible, lasting change, helping not just to house people, but to rebuild lives. Conclusion. In the end, the $120,000 mystery stands less as an accusation than as a lament, for noble intentions left unfulfilled, for dollars scattered without direction, for lives lost in fentanyl's haze. California's story, stitched into the larger fabric of homelessness across America, reminds us of a hard truth. Compassion without strategy is little more than wind blowing through empty tents. And yet, within the quiet promise of reform, through integrated care, unshakable accountability, and a deep-rooted resolve, lies the seed of redemption. Our task is to plant it with patience and tend it with the wisdom of years, so that even the darkest corners might one day bloom with the enduring light of home.
They got a puppy.